Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about the 5 not so obvious mistakes you could be doing in your one-arm handstand training. I could probably list about 10 reasons why one-arm handstands are so difficult. You can fall 360 degrees, left, right, forward, back, to the side. Whichever way is possible, you can fall that way. The alignment itself, the twisting and turning when you're on one arm, whether or not your working shoulder can stay in the middle or is it constantly collapsing to the side. The very balance on one arm itself. The transfer of weight between two-arm handstand to one-arm handstand and the process in between. Your conditioning and stamina on both two arms and one arm, which is way more crucial and critical. The loss of focus, the ability to zone in and zero in on a target in one-arm handstand. The difference between your right side and your left side, your strong side and your weak side. And last but not least, finding the right drills and progressions that suits your level in your one-arm handstand training. So with that being said, not only do you want to train correctly, which calls for a separate video, you also want to avoid some of the obvious and not so obvious mistakes that you could be doing in your one-arm handstand training. So today we're going to get into all that. Let's get to it. Mistake number 1, attempting the one-arm handstand without a good foundation to start with. This is probably the most common mistake I see, is that when somebody has a two-arm handstand that's just good enough, they go straight for the one-arm handstand training right away. I know this very well because I was one of those people myself. Could I do a two-arm handstand? Yes. Was there control there? Barely. Could I transition between different shapes? Barely. Was my line straight? Absolutely not. The thing about it is that at that stage, it's hard to have enough self-awareness to actually know if your two-arm handstand is good enough for one-arm handstand training. It's just really difficult to have that self-awareness and to actually know where you're at in your skills. So here are some questions that you could ask yourself to actually have an objective view to know and understand whether or not we are ready for the one-arm handstand training. First question is my line actually straight? And second, do I have a good tuck and straddle? And can I transition between these two shapes without too much trouble and with some fluidity? Number 3, can I do head positions? Can I look up and down without falling in my two-arm handstand? Number 4, can I actually enter into my two-arm handstand with consistency and with accuracy every single time? And can I do that with a straddle entry and a tuck entry and a pike entry? Are your entries consistent? And last but not least, can I hold a steady handstand with good control, with good alignment for at least 1 minute? So if you've answered no on majority of these questions, maybe it's good to sharpen your foundation first before actually attempting something that's incredibly way harder. I've made an actual video about handstand foundation on this very topic, so you can check out that video if you guys want to. There are just no shortcuts when it comes to handstands, so building a strong foundation is a must. And now moving on to the second mistake would be to focus too much on your hold times. So I see this quite a lot in various stages. The first one is when you're still on the fingertips. When you're on the fingertips, some people will tend to really focus on how much time they're spending there. Maybe they're doing 10 or 15. And the second one would be they're kind of almost having the one arm. They're lifting their free arm and they're hovering in the air just by a little bit. And instead of trying to build that as a habit and grow muscle memory, they're trying to hold for as long as they can and really trying to break records and break their personal best. So in my experience, longer hold times are an accumulation of good technique, muscle memory, and overall mileage and experience in that position. So if you're training those qualities that I just mentioned, your hold times will increase incrementally through time. You don't have to always go for the longest time possible because you might get there one day and the next day you might not. But the important thing is building good habits, and working on the entries towards that hold. You just won't get a 10-second one-arm handstand hold in your first month of finding success. It just doesn't work that way. Progress takes time, and you need to be really patient with yourself instead of trying to break personal bests every single time. So instead of trying to base your practice on how much time are you holding, you can focus your energy into technique, alignment, and execution. Those three things will get you success every single time later down the road. And those are basically your foundation when it comes to one-arm handstand training. So now let's move on to mistake number 3, which would be to lift the free arm too early or maybe not at all. So when we're training the one-arm handstand, it's easy to fall into the trap of let's lift the free arm, let's test it, let's test our balance in this position. When in reality, we're nowhere near that stage and we haven't passed those tests prior to lifting the free arm yet. And I get it, sometimes we want to test our luck or feel like we're on that one arm because that training, that process, it's so grueling. I mean, it takes a long time. For some people, it takes years to even have that ability to start lifting the free arm. So I definitely understand. But sometimes when you're not ready, you still have a lot more work to do. So it's good to have that patience. When your free arm is ready to lift, you're gonna know. You're gonna feel strong in that working arm. You're gonna feel light and you're gonna feel balance within your whole body. And when you lift the free arm, it's just gonna work itself. It's not gonna jump from zero balance to 100% balance over a span of 5 minutes or one day or even a week. You're gonna feel that progression happening. So there's no point to rush the process and to try to lift the free arm every single training session just to test where we're at. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that never ever lift the free arm. And when they're doing that, they're staying really in their comfort zone of where they feel safe, where they feel in control, and never really going outside of that to challenge themselves to the next level. So they get really super good at the fingertip holds, but when they're actually ready to lift a free arm, and they do, they spin out of control and they fall right away because it's a completely different feeling. And it's a different mode altogether when you're on the fingertips and when you lift the arm up. And the higher you lift the arm, the worse they're gonna feel because it requires more control. So the point I'm trying to make is that you need a balanced approach when it comes to training the one-arm handstand, especially when you're on the edge of fingertips or lifting the hand off the floor. You have to be patient, you have to know where you are in terms of progress, but you also need to know when the timing is right, when you need to start challenging yourself to the next level and start lifting your arm little by little. But you don't want to do either or where you're staying completely in your comfort zone or you're challenging yourself over the edge where you can't handle it. You want to be somewhere in between. Strike a good balance. That's kind of what this whole thing is about anyways, right? And now let's move on to mistake number 4 would be to train one single drill for way too long. So when we're training one arm, sometimes we can get stuck on one drill for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe even more, okay? I know I was one of them. I was trying to crack the code. I was trying to beat the game in that one single session. And basically, my ego just never wanted to let go and wanted to win at that very situation. And for me, majority of the time, it was trying to do the one-arm handstand hold. So I would go on two arms, I would shift my weight to the side, and I would try to bring my free arm off into the air, and I was just trying to get the hold. And the worst part was I was getting a little hold. It just never had that enough control for me to claim it was a definite one-arm hold. I was hovering, I was hanging, and I was trying to do that for hours on end. And during the later parts of that training, I would get more and more tired and the technique would worsen and I would try even harder to get that skill back. And I ended up doing one single thing, one drill for the entire training session, which lasted maybe 3 hours. And let me just tell you from experience, this is a horrible way to train and to improve because your body and mind needs a different view. It needs a reset. It needs to do something else. Not just because your muscles are physically tired, but your ability to focus is just really compromised at that point. You want to train other aspects that contribute to the same goal, but not necessarily the same drill again and again and again and again and again. When you're doing this, it's mostly ego, and another part is we don't really know what else to train. We don't have the necessary progressions that we have on hand that we can go to know that we can improve in other areas and not just with this single drill. So I made a whole video talking about the three core elements that you could do in your training and your programming to improve your one arm handstand or just two arms in general that you should have in your regimen. So check that video out and really use it as a guide to help you program and to design your own progressions if you don't really have a one-on-one coach or some other source of inspiration where you can draw from to train your one-arm handstands. So now we're on our fifth and final mistake that you could be doing on your one-arm handstand, which would be to not train a single drill enough. I know it sounds like the opposite of our last mistake, but hear me out. When we are introduced to a one-arm handstand progression or drill, our first instinct would be to try to crack the code and try to get really good at it. But sometimes what we think is doing it good enough might not actually be. All the secrets are in the details, not just doing the thing with a C plus and moving on to the next drill. In my initial stages of learning the one arm, I've probably repeated the same drills for 1 to 2 years. No joke. It wasn't exactly the same drills every single day, but I had basically a pool of drills and progressions that I could choose from. Depending on the day, my progress, I chose the best ones that were suited for me at that time. Like I said before, the devil is in the details, and every drill and progression has something to teach us. They're essentially our biggest teachers. So it's important to spend a lot of time, take a deep dive, take a master class in that drill itself. Obviously, you don't want to spend more than 30 minutes on that drill in one day, but that's why it takes a lot of time, weeks, years, maybe even a couple years with that same drill to really get the overall essence of what that drill is trying to teach us. So it's important to master those drills and really try to get an A plus and a true understanding of why that drill is good and important for our journey, rather than just trying to pass with a C plus and do things not so cleanly and move on to the next drill. Essentially, a lot of these drills that you're encountering now in your journey towards the one-arm handstand, they're going to serve as a bedrock and foundation for your one-arm handstand to come. A lot of drills that I used back then is what I use now as a warm-up to remind myself this is where I need to be for that one-arm hold to come easily. So really spend a lot of time on those drills and really try to get really good at them. Really. So by now you probably have a better understanding of what to do and what not to do in your one-arm handstand training. Patience is key, but you don't want to be too hesitant and too patient, or you don't want to be too aggressive and confident at the same time. You want to have a more objective and realistic approach when it comes to training. A big part of training and progress is understanding when we can actually advance from something because we are past that stage, and when we actually need to stay back and stay with those progressions a little bit longer because there are more things we can learn from them. This is really the key of improvement and progression in your one-arm handstand. Stick with it, have patience, but know when you need to step up and go outside the comfort zone. If you also have any other mistakes that you want to share, leave it in the comments. As always, if you want to support this channel, please hit subscribe and like on this video. It'll help me out a lot and it'll just spread the message even further. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting. As always, thank you and see you next time. Bye bye.